Happy National Fossil Day. I'm Pamela Owen, Associate Director of Texas Memorial Museum. Ben Grawl, our Visitor Services Manager, is behind the camera today. Museum is still closed, but we're going to take this opportunity to give you a close-up look at some of our most beautiful and delicate fossils. They come from the Permian period, about 270 million years ago, when West Texas was a time of oceans and great growth of reefs. But the reef builders of this time were not the corals that we're so familiar with today. They were reefs that were built by animals such as these. Come closer, come closer. These fossils that we have in this case, most of them come from the Glass Mountains in Brewster County, Texas. They get their name, Glass Mountains, because of the high amount of silica in the rocks and in the fossils. And it's that silica, that glass, is what leads to the formation of some exquisite and very delicate reef builders. Let me show you one close up. This is a Brachiopod, and this is a shelled animal. It's a filter feeder. It looks a lot like a clam, but it belongs to a group of animals that are a little bit different from clams and oysters, the rest of the group that we call the mollusks. They have two shells, but their feeding structure kind of works like a set of tentacles with tiny hairs. And that is the way that they can bring the water in and they can gather their food and send that down into their digestive system. The shell is preserved silica. When the animal was alive, its shell was made up of calcite, calcium carbonate minerals, and in the process of fossilization, the calcite was completely replaced by silica. A lot of the fossils that come from the Glass Mountains in West Texas are silicified, and that's where the term Glass Mountains come from. Here's another specimen of brachiopods. You can see how elongated this spine is. So these spines grown on the shell are thought to be a way they can protect themselves from predators that might want to crunch down on their shells or might help them suspend themselves above the sediment. What makes them different from clams and oysters is that they actually had a fleshy stalk that allowed them to raise the shells up above that sediment surface. Again, look at the detail. I'm going to turn it around really carefully. You can see some of the texture and some of the structures. Again, with fossils, we're only really looking at the hard parts that are preserved. Most of the soft material is broken down in the process of preservation. Besides the brachiopods, we also have another organism we call bryozoans. You might have seen the living relatives of this 270 million year old bryozoan on the inside of a shell or a rock that you might have found at the beach. It's got that beautiful lacy texture. Bryozoans often are called moss animals, and they're colonial, so each little space that you see housed an individual organism. Again, notice how delicate the structure is. So one of the really cool things about this area of West Texas is that due to that process, that change from a calcite mineral shell to the preserved fossilized shell that's made of silica, we can see the really, really fine details of the shells of these animals. So believe it or not, most of these creatures were the primary reef builders. And if you travel to the Glass Mountains or even to the Guadalupe Mountains in West Texas, you're looking at the work of millions and millions and millions of animals growing those rocks that we now recognize as mountains today.